I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Hey guys, if you like what I'm doing, click the Amazon banner at the top of the homepage on FascinationStreetPod.com and do all of your shopping through Amazon. Once you click on it and it takes you to Amazon, you can bookmark it or add it to your favorites and you won't have to go to my site each time. It helps me keep the show going, and again, thanks for listening. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with comedian Alonzo Bodden. You know Alonzo from TV, film, stand-up comedy, and his podcast called Who's Paying Attention? In this episode, we talk about where he grew up and the industry that he got into straight out of high school. We also talk about his transition from that industry into stand-up comedy and sort of the milestone event that helped him know he was on the right path. And lastly, we talk about his involvement with the NPR game show Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me and how much fun that's been for him and how long he's been doing it. So enjoy, folks. This is comedian Alonzo Bodden.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Alonzo Bodden. How you doing today, man?
I'm good, Steve. How you doing?
I cannot complain. Well, I mean, I guess if I tried really hard, I could, but what's the point? Everybody's complaining enough for me, so I don't got to worry about it. All right, so Alonzo Bodden, I think that you're not originally a California guy. I want to say you're an East Coast dude. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in New York. I grew up in St. Albans, Queens.
I've only been to New York a couple of times. Is St. Albans like an area? Like, is it a neighborhood in Queens or?
It's an area in Queens. It's the southeast tip of Queens near John F. Kennedy Airport. I grew up about 20 minutes from the airport.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. What was that like? That sounds like a busy airport.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't close enough to hear airport noise. You know, it wasn't that close. Working class black neighborhood. Actually, it has a rich history, but not the part of it that I lived in. But there was one section of St. Albans where black stars lived during segregation. So, you know, James Brown had a house over there. Miles Davis had a house over there, and a few other big stars. But that was in a different part than I lived in. But so there was that. And then at some point, 50 Cent called it the hood. And we all looked around and said, what? You just lowered our property value. So, yeah, he called it the hood. But my friends who lived in the hood, who lived in South Central, who lived in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, this is back when Brooklyn was black, they called me living in the country because I had a backyard, a garage, a lawn. So, you know.
Way to go. Thanks a lot, 50.
Exactly. Then he moved to Connecticut. Kind of shit is that?
Wow, Connecticut. What
Yeah.
the hell?
Yeah. So anyway, so that's where I grew up.
Well, that's cool. So how long were you there? Like through high school and whatnot?
Yeah, I actually left right after high school. I went to a school called Aviation High School in New York, learned how to fix airplanes, got my licenses to fix airplanes, and I was hired by Lockheed in Burbank. I moved to LA, never looked back.
Okay, so I don't think that's, I mean, on a rare occasion, maybe, but I don't think that's something that high schools do anymore is like teach a trade. That's fucking super awesome. So the whole school was centered around aviation? I mean, of course you had your basics, but...
New York had a great education system. Obviously, the famous school was Performing Arts High School, right? Where they did the movie Fame and the TV show Fame and all of that.
Right.
But New York had schools. We had aviation, we had automotive. There was a school called Queens Vocational where they taught you things like plumbing and carpentry. And there was Brooklyn Tech that taught certain technical trades and so on. And you could go to a high school and learn a trade. You had to take a test to get into the high school. And once you got in, you'd learn a trade. What happened to that was there were lawsuits, of course. You know, a lot of dumbass kids have smart parents, I guess. So there were lawsuits saying, well, it's unfair that the kid has to take a test to get into the school. So they started letting everybody into any school, and these programs fell apart. But yeah, we worked on planes when we were in high school. We actually had an airplane hangar. The school's still there. The school still has it. And that's what we did. So it was a long school day because we had the regular classes. You had, math, English, social studies, whatever. And then you had shop. And the shop program in your sophomore year, freshman and sophomore was 2 periods, junior was 3, senior was 4. So in my senior year, we had 9 classes a day, whereas most people have 4 or 5. But if you're smart enough and you work hard, you leave with a trade.
That's kick-ass. I feel like more schools around the country should do that because, especially now, like with all the shit that's going on with colleges, I mean, you have something dumb like a 60% chance of getting raped when you go to college. And then if you're lucky enough to graduate, or even not, you walk out of college, with probably 7 or 8 years worth of income of debt. So I think it's really cool that, you can learn a trade in high school and then get out of high school and go start making money immediately. For instance, when my uncles and aunts and stuff, when they were in high school, the high school taught, like, you could get your cosmetology license, you could get your welding certificate, you could get your automotive or plumbing certificates or licenses. But by the time I went to that same school, they didn't have none of that shit.
And you know what the problem is? It costs money. That's what it is. People don't want to pay taxes. People don't want to pay anything. Like, it costs money to educate the populace. So when we went to aviation, because a lot of my friends, I'm still friends with a lot of guys I went to high school with, and Lockheed hired a few hundred of us when we graduated. Lockheed was like, holy shit, a bunch of kids that are already trained. And they literally set up an employment office in the school library and started hiring people, on the spot. But anyway, aviation was one of the most expensive schools to run because of the aircraft connection, right? Using aircraft fuel and tools and this and that. And they had to maintain a high graduation rate. I think we had like a 90% rate of passing of the FAA exams to be a mechanic. They had to maintain that to get the budget. In other, it was like, if people aren't passing the test, we're not going to spend the money. Well, like anything else, through tax cuts and this and that, people don't want to spend money. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to do these things. And that's why these school programs went away. It's like music. I have a lot of friends who are musicians. Schools stopped teaching music. They just stopped because they were like, we got to cut the budget somewhere. We still want to teach math, so we got to cut music. So they cut music out of schools and, all kind of programs like that. I mean, this is the thing. I know we're getting off topic here, but it's one of my beefs with this. I don't want to pay any taxes. Well, then you get a dumb population.
You do talk about that sort of a lot on your podcast, so I know it's important to you, and I do want to talk about that in a little bit. Is that cool?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's keep going down this education road. I think that, there's ways where it doesn't need to be tax dollars. Like, for instance, Lockheed, since they know they're going to be hiring a bunch of people there, they could kick in a couple of dollars, and so can some of the other places, like.
Oh, they used to. We used to get donations from airlines all the time. The school got donations from airlines. They were aware of it. The other thing we had alumni who worked for various airlines, aircraft companies, and so on that would do things to support the school.
What happened? Like, I mean, I know that you say it's taxes, but I feel like it's a mindset.
Well, it's not just taxes. That's part of it. Like I said, another thing was there was a lawsuit in New York, and I don't know the specifics of it because I was already gone, but they basically wanted to open up these high schools. So they used to have to test to get in, and they eliminated that, right? So they opened up the school. It didn't work once it was opened. Once it became a regular school, in other words, instead of a school about aviation, it became a regular high school with an aviation program.
Gotcha.
Which isn't the same thing. So it's still there for some kids, and some kids do it and they work at it and so on. but it wasn't the same as when we were there. Because another thing that happens when you have a school like that is there is a school spirit, like we're doing something, you know. And there were a lot of things that they couldn't do now, right? Like my graduation class, I graduated back in '79. We were the first class that had girls. It used to be an all boys school. So they started letting girls in, which was not a problem at all, except that, you know, our teachers were airplane mechanics, right? So in class, they didn't mind calling you a fucking idiot. Or if you did something, they're like, all right, nice move. You just killed 300 people, you know? Or I remember one teacher, he used to always say things like, no, don't feel bad. The world's always going to need factory workers. Not everyone can be smart. We had a teacher in the propeller class. He had the tip of a propeller. So think of a flat piece of aluminum about 12 inches across that weighs about 3 pounds. If you fell asleep in class, he would throw it at you.
No shit.
And it would slam on your desk and scare the shit out of you, right? You're not allowed to do that anymore. You know what I mean? It's just those kind of things. But it wasn't bad. It was real because they were treating you kind of like you're a mechanic. We fuck with each other. We talk shit, you know, but they weren't teachers who went to college and learned to teach. You know what I mean? It was a different kind of vibe.
Well, that was back when part of high school was to prepare you for the real world, and shit like that is going to happen in your real life.
Right. But culture, you know, as you know, culture has changed.
Now, this is the same New York that, like, when a kid is 1 year old, they're interviewing for daycares, right? Or preschool or whatever.
No, that's a different New York. That is rich Manhattan, New York. They're worried about my kid has to be born in the right hospital so he can get into preschool and go to Harvard. Yeah, that's a different reality.
Meanwhile, you can't take a test to get into a vocational. That's just weird, man. So you got hired by Lockheed right out of high school to go work in Burbank, right?
Yeah.
I believe I have heard you tell tale of working on the stealth bomber. Is that the correctness?
No, we worked on the stealth fighter, much lesser known than the stealth bomber. It was a plane called the F-117. So even this was crazy. Like when I look back on it, when I look back on my early life, it really was kind of insane in the sense that I skipped from the 7th to the 9th grade. So in the 9th grade, I'm 14 years old, and they're asking me where I want to go to school. So it's kind of like, yeah, we want you to choose a career. You know, you're 14 now, you're old enough.
Wow.
So I choose the aviation high school, which I have no regrets about. I loved it, you know, and it was a good experience. I graduated high school early, graduated at 17, too young to go work at Lockheed, had to wait till my 18th birthday. I go to work at Lockheed, and my first job is on a top secret aircraft, right? So I needed a security clearance. And, you know, since my name's not Jared Kushner and my father-in-law isn't the president, I actually had to go through a background check to get a security clearance. So guys who I grew up with, who I hung out with, were calling me like, yo, man, the FBI is asking about you.
Wow.
So that was it. You know, that was part of it. But anyway, I got my security clearance, and yeah, I worked on the stealth fighter. So the stealth fighter was the airplane used in the first Gulf War. And I was there for 4 years before the layoffs began.
Now, I am wholly unfamiliar with the stealth fighter. I remember they were making posters and shit of the stealth bomber, but I don't ever recall the stealth fighter.
Well, if you Google it, it's no longer secret. You can see pictures of it. It's called the F-117. It's this really angular looking thing. It looked like an insect, and all the angles on the plane had to do with bouncing radar off at different angles. In other words, the radar would hit it, and instead of going back to the radar, it would bounce off and go somewhere else. But yeah, you have to Google it. I can't even describe the plane. It had a lot of new technologies at the time. It was fascinating. I loved working on that.
That sounds awesome. Now this is back with Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Yeah, I think it was Desert Shield. It was used in, like, say, the first Gulf War that Bush Sr. declared war, that one.
Now, my wife was in the Navy at that time, and she was actually out there in the Persian Gulf when it changed from Desert Shield to Desert Storm. So, yeah, I think I remember which war you're talking about.
Yeah. That's the shame we got to make that statement, but it's real.
Yeah, no shit. So you're in Burbank and you're working at Lockheed on some really cool secret shit, and you did that for, what did you say, like 4 years?
Well, off and on through the 80s. So the nature of the aerospace business was layoffs, because like the government would buy, say they buy 100 stealth fighters, right? So Lockheed's in production, Lockheed's building, blah, blah, blah. Now they finish 100 planes. They're like, okay, if they don't renew the contract, they don't need their workforce anymore, right? So they start laying off people. But at the same time, the government just bought 100 cargo planes from McDonnell Douglas. So you get laid off at Lockheed. You're like, yeah, but Douglas is hiring. And you bounce around. If it's your career, you're hoping to find a job that sticks. But I was kind of just through the 80s bouncing around, working on different aircraft, different aerospace companies. I did a lot of contract work for American Airlines on their DC-10 fleet. I worked for McDonnell Douglas. There's a division called Recovery and Modification. Okay, so when you hear in the news like an airplane went off the runway or two airplanes collided on the ground, you know, their wingtips collided, right, while they were taxiing, that is handled like a car accident on an immense scale. So what happens is inspectors, engineers, and so forth take a look at the plane and decide either A, we can fix this, or B, it's scrap, you know, just like your car, right? Well, I was part of the team that would go fix it. So we would come in and we would work on a plane. It might take us a month, 2 months, might take 3 or 4 months, and we would rebuild the airplane. So I did that for a few years, and that was really fun and interesting, and I got to bounce around the country a lot. I worked in San Juan for 4 months. That's when I fell in love with Puerto Rico. So I did that, and all of that ultimately led to me working as an instructor at McDonnell Douglas, training new mechanics. And that's when the comedy came in, because I was always funny. I could always make people laugh, but I had never been in front of a group until I started teaching. And when I got in front of the classroom, whereas public speaking is probably the biggest fear people have, for me, it was the most natural thing in the world. I never even thought about it. I just went up there and taught and was talking, telling jokes, telling them stories, making fun of the students, and decided, yeah, this comedy thing might work.
So to you, there's not much of a difference between, you know, maybe a class of 20 to a club with 2,000?
No, there isn't. And I didn't know that until I did it, until I got in front of the group, that it didn't bother me. You know, public speaking was very normal.
So I have to imagine that your parents were super proud that, you know, you're straight out of high school, you got a great job working in the aerospace industry. What was their reaction when you said, hey, guess what? I'm going to go tell jokes?
Well, there were a few other things involved. Publicly, they were with it. I'm sure privately they had their concerns. The funniest one was my brother. He told me his wife said, okay, we're not lending him money.
Oh, that is awesome.
That was the funniest reaction. But no, they were supportive. The family was supportive.
Are your parents still alive?
No, sadly, my mom passed away last year and my dad passed away 11 years ago.
I'm sorry about that.
Well, they did get to enjoy my career. They got to see me on, you know, TV and doing specials and stuff like that. And what they used to love was when I did my cruise gigs, they could go on cruises, you know, got to take my mom to Europe. That's where I get by the way, my sense of humor comes from my mother. She was hilarious. For example, you know, when I took her to Europe, she told my dad she always wanted to go to Europe. And my dad was like, I've been to Europe. And she was like, that was World War II.
Different Europe.
They've changed it. Yeah, I got a million memories like that of laughing with my mom. So that's a good thing.
Now, you said back when I used to do cruises, don't you still do cruises?
Yeah, I still do. I still do my jazz cruises and stuff like that. But I just meant they got to go back when they were alive. So
Gotcha. What is a jazz cruise?
fantastic, especially because I'm a big jazz fan. I work with a company. It's called Entertainment Cruise Productions. And what they do is they charter the ship. They basically rent the ship. And Michael, the CEO of the company, is really funny. He said, let me tell you something. The first time you write a check to rent a cruise ship, that's a big ass check.
Yeah, no shit. I can't even imagine how many figures are in that number. How many commas?
I don't know either, but there's at least two. There's at least two commas.
Good God.
So they charter the ship, and then he brings on all kind of jazz artists. And I mean, we have different cruises now. If you listen to jazz at all, you might know some of the names: Marcus Miller, Robert Glasper, George Benson, Boney James, Layla Hathaway, just on and on, Wynton Marsalis, and so on. So for a week, you have these jazz artists performing different concerts and doing Q&As and so on. I do a couple of comedy shows and I do some interviews and, hosting and stuff like that. And we cruise through the Caribbean and people love it. People absolutely love it. And it's fun. I tell everyone that if you want to go on a cruise, find a charter that does what you want to do. But besides doing jazz, they also had a Star Trek cruise, best of the 80s. This company in particular did music, but there are different kind of cruises for what you want to do. So I love being a part of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think Specialized Cruises is kind of big business. I know Corolla does one. The Impractical Jokers do one. New Kids on the Block did one last year, I think.
Yeah, it's huge business because people who go on the cruise, you have a common demographic, right? So
right.
When you do a cruise, like if you just get on a cruise, if you don't have a good travel agent or something, it's hit or miss. So you might be, let's say you're adults and you end up on a booze cruise, which is a bunch of kids who are too young to drink on land, but are allowed to drink at sea. So they're drunk all week, right? Or you might end up on a cruise full of senior citizens and you're, a 25-year-old couple looking to do something, right? You could easily end up on the wrong ship. So this way, hey, all of us have something in common. We like the type of entertainment on the cruise or the celebrities on the cruise. Look, there's a stripper cruise, right? Which I guess you can spend a week just looking at the pole.
That sounds like an odd place to be for a week. It sounds uncomfortable.
It seems like it'd be too much, right? Like a day or two, you'd be like, okay. But after day 4, you're like, all right, I'm good. But it's out there. Somebody's doing it. Somebody's having fun. So
yeah, that's an interesting conversation at the buffet table. Hey, didn't I see you? Like, you look familiar. You look a little different. Maybe because you're wearing clothes, but that's weird.
You got to be careful.
Very cool. And how long have you been doing it?
10 years now.
Wow.
I stumbled into it like everything else. A friend got me the gig. He's a jazz percussionist. He got me on. And when I got on the ship and they found out that I really am a fan of jazz and I knew who all the artists were and I made fun of the artists, they loved that I would roast them because they were like, wow, he knows who we are. I mean, let's face it, jazz ain't the most popular thing in the world.
Sure.
It turned into a good fit for me to be out there with these guys, just become part of the family, I guess. And I love it because it leads to a lot of gigs in a genre that I love with people that I love. The jazz thing. Jazz is like a super creative vibe, type of music. And these musicians are super talented and so on. And I get to hang out with them and get to know them. So that part is fun. Yeah, this is a gig that there's a lot of comics waiting for me to die because they want this gig. You just tell them I ain't going nowhere.
I think you just did. So let's talk about your stand-up. I think the first time I saw you was on Last Comic Standing a long time ago.
Yeah.
First, how long did it take you to fully support yourself as a comedian?
4 years.
You had that number ready. Does that come up often?
Yeah, it comes up often, and I know exactly when it happened. With some people, it was a gradual change or this or that. With me, I did New Faces of Comedy in Montreal at Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. And when I walked off stage, there were offers back then. This is back in the late 90s. Production companies, networks, studios, they would go to the festival looking to sign new talent. So I got signed to a development deal. Unfortunately, it didn't develop into a show, but they did give me a big ass check. And I was like, I get to keep this, right? And they were like, oh, yeah, yeah. And that was when, that was like, good. Quit the day job. And I am now a full-time comic. And then I started, the grind, working the road, working clubs, et cetera, et cetera.
So that was back in the day when they did holding deals, right? Where it was like, we're going to do something with you. We're not sure what yet, but don't do anything with anybody else.
Right. Yeah. They would basically buy you off the market for a year and try to do something. And that changed. And now they still do it with a few comics, but they do it more with writers and producers now.
Interesting. So how hard is it for you to write material?
It's not hard because I write about what inspires me, what I think is funny, what I think is stupid, things like that. I think the hardest thing is to get hired to do a specific gig and have to write jokes for that. For example, I got a gig a couple of years ago where it was for the first responders of Detroit. So it was police and firemen and paramedics in Detroit. So I was like, oh, I got to come up with some first responder jokes, some this, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Or I was hired to do, something for Audi cars. So I got to come up with some jokes about Audi. So that's harder because I want to sit down and write jokes about a specific topic. But it's not, I've been doing it 26 years. I got, so it's what I do. I don't think about it as this is difficult. The hardest thing about my job, airports and airlines, travel. They pay me to travel. I tell jokes for free.
Didn't Bo Diddley used to say something like that?
Did he? Don't tell me that. I thought that was mine.
I'm about 97% sure Bo Diddley used to say, or maybe it was B.B. King. It was either Bo or B.B. One of them said, they pay me to travel. I play for free.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyone who's in this entertainment business could say it because it's true.
Yeah, no shit. Like right now, you couldn't be further away from your house right now.
Not only could I just was. So.
Oh, that's right. You were in Nova Scotia or some shit, right?
I live in LA. I'm in Springfield, Massachusetts. So you're like, well, that's the other end of the country. No, I was further east. I was in Halifax last week. So that's a typical week, right? So I went from Halifax to Phoenix to LA to Springfield, Massachusetts in the past 10 days.
So how long was that development deal? Like, how long did that have you on reserve for?
It was for a year. But like I said, it was enough money. It wasn't just that, though. What happened when I did New Faces in Montreal, it was like, okay, he's a comic now. For example, my first job in comedy, I was the doorman at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, right? I went and did their open mic audition. And Jamie Masada, the owner, said, listen, I need a door guy. Work the door, and I'll give you spots when people don't show up, right? So I'm working the door at a club, hoping that people don't show up. Now, this was a great education because this is in the early 90s. So every night I'm watching guys like George Wallace and Dom Herrera and George Lopez and Damon Wayans, coming in doing their spots. So I'm watching them and I'm learning from them and I'm getting on stage now and then. So now flash forward to Montreal, Dom Herrera was the host. And when I did my spot, he said, I was just thinking, wow, this guy's really funny for a doorman. So the great thing about it was I became a comic in the eyes of other comics. In other words, it was like when I joined a fraternity, guys like Chris Titus, who, I'm still friends with, but Titus had been through that experience a couple of years before me. So he pulled me to the side and he said, hey, man, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get this deal. They're going to do this. You're going to get that, So it was when I became a comic in the eyes of other comics. And then you start doing things that are just fucking weird, right? Like I remember being at the Improv and I was talking with Damon Wayans and Dave Chappelle. We were joking about the road or something like that. But if you ever have that moment where you're kind of on the outside of yourself looking in, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing talking to Chappelle and Damon Wayans? You know what I mean? But yeah, now I'm a comic. I'm in the fraternity. I'm in the club. So that was the great thing about doing Montreal and doing the festival was I became a comic. I got the respect of the other comics as like, you're one of us. I remember it was 99. I was in Montreal and Joe Rogan, who I knew from the Laugh Factory, like, hey, come on, we're going to go do spots. And I jump in a cab and I'm with Joe Rogan and Kevin James just bouncing around Montreal doing spots on different shows. And at that time, that was when Kevin's first show had just started and Joe was in between talk radio news radio and Fear Factor, So the great thing about comedy is, and being a comic is, if you're a comic, no matter what level you're on, you're still a comic, right? So I'm hanging out with these guys are stars. They have TV shows, but they're still like, yeah, you're good enough to get on stage with it. You know what I mean? That's what was great about that era of my career. Obviously, the money was great and doing it as a full-time job was great. But the thing as a comic is getting the respect of your peers and of the pros, that was a great thing.
It's sort of like the 90s version or your version of, getting called over to sit down on the Johnny Carson show.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That was it. I was in. It
was life-changing in a multifaceted way. So that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it really was.
My name is Phil Rossi. I'm the creator of the sci-fi horror experience Crescent, along with Eden, Harvey, and a whole lot of other scary stories. 50 hours of all new podcasts are ready for download on demand, including my new book, The Trance, a gothic cyberpunk detective story. And let me tell you, this book has got fangs. For more info and to get your hands on the free podcasts, visit patreon.com/Phil Rossi. Now turn out the lights and take a deep breath, because the story is about to begin.
The next thing that happened was this place called Dublin's. So Dublin's was an Irish bar on Sunset Strip, just halfway between the Laugh Factory and the Comedy Store. And we started doing this Tuesday night open mic. It was a comic named Ahmed and a guy named Jay Davis. They started it. They were running it. And me, Dane Cook, Darren Carter, we would be there every week, right? So Dublin's grew into this thing where all the pros would come in and do spots. It was free. It was a free show. We got paid in food. They gave you dinner. But this was from 2001 to 2004. So this is when Dane Cook was becoming Dane Cook. The names of the people who used to come to Dublin's all the time: Ken Jeong, Dr. Ken, Craig Robinson, Sebastian, Bobby Lee, Ralphie May, and on and on. This was all of us when we became we started to become who we became. You know what I mean? It was super fun. And I would be there every week. I would close the show every week. So Dane would go on before me. And this is when Dane was moving from comic to rock star. and then I would follow Dane, and I would just sit up there and riff. I would just literally sit on stage and just kind of, because to me, it was still an open mic. So it was just a fun time. It was a great time. That was our equivalent when you hear, Seinfeld and Leno and all of those guys talk about the improv back in the 70s and 80s. That's what Dublin's was for us.
Kick ass. And you're still friends with probably all of those people?
All of us. Yeah, we're all still friends. We, careers have gone different ways, success on different levels. I wish I could say I was at the top of that food chain, but it's kind of like we went through our development years in comedy, and then guys would get certain things. Toward the end of that was when I won Last Comic Standing. And the funny thing about that was the crowd at Dublin's, they were like, hey, we didn't know you could do like regular comedy. They thought all I ever did was sit on a stool and talk. They didn't realize that, no, I'm developing material to go to, like I say, Dane became the rock star. And that was around the time that Dr. Ken got knocked up. He got his role in the movie Knocked Up, and that started that movie career and so on. So
that's awesome. That's got to be somewhere around when Craig got The Office, right?
Yeah. Craig and I used to go on the same auditions, and then he started getting the parts.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, we had the same agent for a while, and my agent, this guy named TJ Markwalter, who's a great guy and a great agent, he said, man, I got an actor who wants to do comedy and a comic who wants to act, even though I didn't really want to act, but, TV pays well.
Sure, yeah. And most of the time you get to sleep in your own bed. Well, sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing I never got. I've always been a road guy. But my heroes were road comics. My comedy heroes were George Wallace, Lewis Black, Chris Rock. And those guys did it they would do comedy on the road, and then they would get their shows and movies. So I thought that's how you did it. I ain't complaining. I've had a great run, but I didn't get that. I didn't get up that hump.
Gotcha. Hey, do you still ride motorcycles?
If you were to ask my business manager, she would tell you I only work to come home and buy motorcycles.
Sweet. So I know that you had an accident a few years ago and had to have some surgery. So that didn't keep you off the horse, so to speak?
No, man, that was just one thing. I broke my wrist, and I had to have surgery to fix my wrist. That is a case of Wikipedia and social media. If you go on Wikipedia, the way that, and I don't know who wrote this, right? Because I don't know who put shit on Wikipedia. It just appears. They had me listed as some kind of Ducati motorcycle racer and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this is all very flattering.
This is all very flattering.
A heavy motorcycle racer weighs 125 pounds. Okay, first of all. The other thing is, just like any other profession, you know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to play high school basketball. It's another thing to be in the NBA. It's one thing to ride motorcycles the way I do. It's a whole nother thing to be a professional motorcycle racer. But Wikipedia said I was a professional motorcycle racer risking my life. I was like, all right, maybe this will fool a few women. I'll leave it up there.
It's good to hear that you still ride and apparently collect, I guess.
I don't collect. I wish I could. I don't keep anything that I don't use. So my garage is kind of a rotating. I call it my Jay Leno starter set. At any given time, I may have 3, 4, or 5 bikes, but then I'll see something new and I want that. So I'll sell one to buy another and so on. I mean, I'm lucky to be able to do it. It's a lot of fun, and that's the other thing that's fun, right? You talk about weird shit. Like, I'm friends with Jay Leno and we talk bikes and stuff like that. And other celebrities who are into them. And when we get around our bikes or cars, because I'm a car nut too, although not on the same level, I get to talk bikes with Jay Leno and talk cars with Adam Carolla and, go to events and stuff like that. That's why I call it my escape, because it's so much fun. And my career kind of intersects with it, in a good way. And on occasion, I get free shit, which is nice.
Very cool. You got involved with Wait, Don't Tell Me several years ago. How did that come about?
Wait was interesting because when I first did Wait, I didn't even know what it was. My agent at the time talked to them about me, and their producers came to see me. I was doing a show in Chicago, and I didn't even know about this, it's always best that you don't know about it. They saw me. They liked what I did on stage. They invited me to do the show. And I went in, and to me, it was just like, oh, it's some kind of news talk show. Now, mind you, I had never listened to Wait. I didn't know what it was. So I do my first one, and to me, it's just a panel, and I just got to be funny on the panel answering these questions. So Peter Sagal, the host, comes up to me. He said, man, that was one of the best first-timers we've ever had on the show. Because I'm not thinking in terms of panelists. I'm thinking in terms of being a comic, right? So I'm just being funny. And it was a great fit because I do love doing topical comedy. I love doing news-based stuff. And they started having me on a regular basis. Now, the Wait, the NPR audience is very funny because they're very loyal, but they're slow to accept you. So for the first 2 years, I was like, I don't even think I'm in the program. I think they're still like, we're not sure about this guy. But now, yeah, I'm part of the fraternity and part of the crew and a regular panelist, and I love doing the show.
Feel free to not answer this, but is that a paying gig for you?
Yeah, it pays scale.
Yeah, I mean, well, NPR is not known for having all the money. They're really known for asking for money.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I got to see you on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me live in San Antonio I think it was last month.
Yeah.
Was that your first time in San Antonio?
No, I used to work Laughs, the comedy club that used to be in San Antonio. I think it was taken over by the Improvs. But yeah, I've worked San Antonio. It's a great city. It's a great town. The club was at the mall down off the Riverwalk.
Yeah, River Center Mall.
Yeah, so I used to work that, and I hadn't been there in a few years, but San Antonio is a great city. It was fun to get back and fun to do a Wait, Wait there.
Well, it was super fun. I think it was the first time Wait, Wait came to San Antonio, and it was really, really cool to see it live and in person. It was awesome.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it was the first time they'd been there, but I remember Peter saying, they said, when are we going to come back? And he said, in 21 more years. Every 21 years we'll be here.
Dan Rather showed up to be the special guest that day.
Well, that's the amazing thing about Wait, Wait are the guests who come in. So for those listening who've never seen the show, we do a segment called Not My Job. And they invite a celebrity or a name, somebody famous for one thing, and they ask them questions about something else. I have seen everyone on that show from Dan Rather to George Clinton of Parliament.
No shit. George Clinton was on there?
We had George Clinton one week. Yes, we did.
Oh,
yes,
my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah. Comey, the ex-FBI director, when we did one in D.C. last summer, James Comey was the guest. Hell, they had Kim Kardashian one week. I think she did it by phone. But she was there. I wasn't on that particular show. But yeah, they've had everyone. Hell, they've had Tom Hanks as a guest host.
Very cool. Well, that was a lot of fun, and everybody, if you get the chance, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's more affordable than you think it might be, and like I said, it was such a blast. Now, I think that particular day, I believe it was like, I don't know, National Siblings Day or something, and you gave a shout out to your brother. How is your brother since he has your kidney?
My brother's fine. So 5 years ago, I donated a kidney to my brother. People are like, oh, you're great. I'm like, no, he owed me money. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't a big deal, though, because as organ transplants go, the kidney, I think, is one of the more common ones. And if you're healthy, and believe me, Steve, I was healthy. They do every medical test. I told my brother, I said, you don't owe me for the kidney. You owe me for the colonoscopy. They make sure you're healthy. If your body's healthy, when they remove a kidney, your body doesn't know it. There are people born with one kidney that live their whole life and they're fine. So it didn't affect me. And what it does for him or for any kidney recipient, it may not be a matter of life and death. In his case, it wasn't a matter of life and death, but it was a matter of not having to do dialysis, which dialysis changes your whole life because now you have to live around getting your dialysis done and, being able to schedule it and so forth. So it's more of quality of life versus life or death. But I was happy to do it. I'm a big supporter of live donor programs and organ donation because it works.
That stuff is crazy. So now, are you a huge fan of Sean Elliott now? Like all of a sudden, you guys are brothers now?
No, the Alonzo I have something in common with now is Alonzo Mourning because he's a kidney recipient.
Well, you're not a kidney recipient.
I'm a donor, but the point being that, the first thing I owed to him was making my name pronounceable because they've been like, Alonzo, I never heard that name. Is you sure it's not Alfonso? Is it Alphonse? Then Alonzo Mourning hit the world and they were like, oh, that's how you say it.
Nice.
I'm good with him.
Back to that night in San Antonio on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's not because I think all black people know each other. I'm asking it for a reason. Do you know Idris Elba?
No.
And here's why I'm asking. When it was that one of these stories is true and two of them aren't?
Yeah.
You said his name in such a weird way. None of us even knew what the hell you said until you had rolled over it. You said Idris Elba.
Yeah, Idris. Yeah.
Now, the rest of the world says Idris, and you said Idris?
No, I've heard it as Idris.
No, you have not heard it as Idris.
No, seriously, I have.
All right, well, do you say potato?
I've heard it pronounced both ways. I've heard it pronounced Idris, and I've heard it pronounced Idris.
Well, my apologies. That has been the topic of some conversation around my house. We're just like, what did he say? Did he really say that?
No, I've heard it both ways. Mm-hmm.
Well, my apologies, because I have been making fun of you nonstop since that day.
All right, well, I can take that. I'll put it this way. You knew who I was talking about, right?
Yeah, you got me there.
So, you know.
You got me there, Alonzo Bodden. So, who do you think Zion will sign a shoe deal with next year?
Not only do I think he'll sign with Nike, I think if he doesn't sign with Nike, there's going to be people fired. I think Nike had a meeting and said, if you don't sign this kid, don't come to work tomorrow.
Interesting. Because I have a bet with a friend of mine. He says Nike and I say anybody but Nike. And the reason I say that is because it's a golden, I mean, obviously it's going to be a bidding war to get this kid, but I think that, you know, it's a golden opportunity for anybody else to be like, this dude is too good to play in Nike. Our shoes won't hurt you.
I think Nike's going to sign him and then come up with a shoe and make a joke out of it. Like Chris Webber, you know what the name of Chris Webber's charity foundation?
No.
Time Out.
Oh my gosh. Because of the Michigan thing?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is hilarious.
Right. So I think Nike will come up with a way to capitalize on him blowing out a shoe and then making a shoe for him. The other thing is, why wouldn't you sign with the biggest company? Okay, like in Texas, James Harden. Are kids wearing Adidas because of James Harden?
No.
Exactly. You're not going to make another shoe work. That's just my opinion. Nike's going to give you all the money in the world. Anyone's going to give you all the money in the world. But if you go sign with Nike, people are going to be wearing your shoes. You know, there's like 8 people wearing Steph Curry's Under Armour shoes. There's 25 people wearing James Harden's Adidas. LeBron's Nike contract produced $300 million last year. You know, so I don't know who he's going to sign with, but that's what I would do.
Well, to your point, I think it was probably 10 years into Tim Duncan's career before I even knew he had a shoe, and I live here.
Yeah, although the Admiral had some really cool Nikes.
Yeah, if you played center, I mean, not if you were a point guard.
No, they weren't point guard shoes.
I had a friend of mine he had those back in the 80s, and he said that point guards couldn't wear them because the high top went all the way up to your knee.
Yeah, it did. It went all. I have a pair, and yeah, they go all the way up around the ankle. Like, yeah, you know, it's a boot.
You have a pair of David Robinsons?
Yeah, well, they reissued them. Nike reissues everything.
Damn.
I had everything back in the day. Listen, if we knew about it, you know, we'd have all bought a couple of extra pair of Jordans.
Yeah, no
and
shit.
Anything else and stashed them. But back then, there wasn't the sneakerhead world.
Right.
You know, you bought a pair of Jordans and you actually played basketball in them.
Times sure have changed.
You know, hey, it's funny you mentioned weight. I just got a text from a friend that said Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, is going to be a guest on Wait, Don't Tell Me. And that kills me because I'm not going to be doing the show.
Oh, you can go hang out, right? They'll let you. Maybe you can be the special. Oh, no. Yeah.
Let me see. I don't know what episode they're doing. I'll have to look.
Because you're a big Clipper fan, right?
Yep. Season ticket guy.
Yeah, there you go. So what do you think is the biggest misconception about Alonzo Bodden?
That I'm rich. People think that if you've been on TV a few times or something like that, that you're rich. And again, I do okay. You know, I ain't complaining, but I don't have $20 million. That's the big misconception that everybody in entertainment and people like, oh, you're just a Hollywood guy, right? Because I do political and social commentary. So people, oh, you Hollywood guys. It's like, let me tell you something, man. I used to go to the plant every day at Lockheed. You know what I mean? I worked in the real world. I was a union guy. I'm not just talking shit, mansion in the Hollywood Hills. I wish I was, but I'm not. I've been there. So I think that's the biggest misconception.
Nice. Now, as we're headed out, before I get you to tell me all about your social media tags and whatnot, I want you to tell everybody about Who's Paying Attention.
My podcast, Who's Paying Attention, it goes back to the media. Okay, the media is the fourth estate. They were supposed to be the ones who kept an eye on things. They're supposed to be the ones who kept politicians honest, who cut through the bullshit. And then what happened was they became part of the entertainment, and there's no news. So who's paying attention to the truth? So now when you have a liar, they come up with this. I forgot. Recently, the New York Times gave some description of a Trump lie, but they didn't call it a lie. They call it like a repeated inaccuracy or something. You know what I mean? And it's like, come on. So who's paying attention? It's left to the comics. They asked Lewis Black, one of my heroes, friend, and I love this guy as a comic. He said, how come you guys are doing the news? And he's like, well, we didn't want to do it, but fuck, no one else is. Jon Stewart was the most trusted news guy when he was doing the Daily Show, right? Because everything in news now, it's paid for by entertainment. And there's still some good reporters, but a lot of it, as you know, is just bullshit. This is the difference in news. And I don't know how old you are, Steve, but back in the day, people used to get scared when 60 Minutes knocked on the door. There's like video footage of people trying to run out of the back door because 60 Minutes is here. Now they come in and sit on the couch. It's like, no, I want the news to be the fucking news. So I do Who's Paying Attention. I talk about issues that bother me. I talk about issues that are stupid. Sometimes I get to go deeper than the joke on an issue that I joke about. That's what my podcast is about.
Well, you had some particularly interesting and I would say deep thoughts on Jussie Smollett probably a month and a half ago or so on your show. And you played a clip of him doing
It's called Let America Be America Again. And it's a brilliant poem. And here's my thing with Jussie Smollett, right? And this is why Jussie Smollett bothers me. He took advantage of the sympathy or empathy for being black and gay and getting abused or beat up, even more so, I think, in the gay community than the black community, right? Where people would be literally beat up for being gay. And by faking that or whatever the hell happened, next time it happens to somebody, it happens, particularly if it happens to some kid or some ostracized member of society, people don't have to believe them. People be like, oh, this is another Jussie situation. You know what I mean? This is what Me Too is about, right? Where women are saying, yeah, we've been getting this abuse for so many years and nobody believed us. Now we finally have a voice. So that's what bothered me about Jussie Smollett. Let America Be America Again was a brilliant reading of this poem. It's about how good America could be, but we're not. What he's done, I hope it doesn't cheapen the reading of what he did there, but on the big scale, it would be Bill Cosby, right? When you're an artist and then you're found out to be a criminal, a sex abuser, this or that or the other, it diminishes your art.
Absolutely.
That's why it bothered me. Now, I joke about it that, I'm torn because the way he got out of it, he made a phone call to a friend who called the prosecutor and made it go away. I'm like, man, that's white people shit. That's a good move there. We moving up. So there's always comedy in the truth.
Yeah, it's funny because it's true is a phrase for a reason. If I'm not wrong, that's a Langston Hughes poem, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that given your penchant for jazz and that super smooth voice, I think you should record it.
Listen, I would love to get the opportunity to do something like that. Honestly, I would. That reading came from the soundtrack to the movie Marshall, about Thurgood Marshall. And my friend Marcus Miller, who's a brilliant jazz bassist and composer, did the soundtrack. He's the one who put that together.
Do it.
If the opportunity comes up, I damn sure wouldn't say no.
I think it would be amazing, and I can't wait to hear it one day out of nowhere on your show. Tell everybody where they can find Who's Paying Attention, which is nearing 250 episodes, so good job.
Thank you. It is at Alonzo Bodden, ALONZOBODDEN. That's my Facebook and Twitter. I'm also on the All Things Comedy Network, which is a podcast network started by Bill Burr and Al Madrigal. So you can find my podcast there. And then you connect with me on Instagram at ZoFunny, ZOFUNNY, or for the Canadians, ZOFUNNY. Remember when people thought, oh, I'll steal your name and then you'll pay me to buy it back? Again, this is where people think I'm rich. So somebody has my name on Instagram, and I was like, okay, I'll just use a different name.
Yeah, there's plenty of options to choose from. Yeah, that was a big deal at the beginning. I think it even happened to Corolla on Twitter. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they put a stop to that because people were like, oh, I'm going to get Coca-Cola.com, and then I'm going to charge Coca-Cola $10 million for their domain name. And, you know, they were like, no.
Well, before I let you go, Alonzo, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, it's this was cool. This was cool comedy and what I do and how I got here and the news. And I don't know, man. I don't have any deep thoughts for people. Be involved. Read the news. Don't watch your news on TV. Read it.
Now, where do you suggest people can read a fairly unbiased version of the news? Where's that?
I would say read everything. You have to read everything to get the different sides to the story. I think NPR does a pretty good job of being unbiased. I don't think NPR has a big agenda. Another great thing is if you read foreign stuff, if you read like The Guardian, which, you know, looks at the U.S. from the U.K., I like that. But what I do, I have a bunch of different news feeds, including Fox News printed. I can't watch Fox on TV, but I will read some of their print stuff. That's the only way I could think. The only way to balance it is to read more than one source. See, we have this false equivalency, and I've joked about it. Like, for example, science, right? So we have scientists who explain something like climate change or measles transmission, which is a thing now, right? And then on the other side, we have some person who doesn't know what they're talking about, but they have 1 million followers. And we talk about them like they're equal. It's like, no, that's not equal. See, one of them went to school and has experimented and knows what they're talking about, and the other one is just popular.
We're looking at you, Jenny McCarthy.
Yeah, exactly. But they're given equal footing, and it's like, no, it's not equal. I'm going to go with the scientist because they're a scientist.
Yes. Who should I believe? Jenny McCarthy or the most famous astrophysicist on the planet?
Well, obviously, Jenny McCarthy, because
Right.
she had a really good show.
Yes. That's it. That's what it was.
Yeah.
All right. So do you have any dates that you're going to be anywhere?
Oh, you know what I'm going to be doing is and this is a kind of a cool gig. It's a tour. I'm hosting a live version of Family Feud. So we're going to be touring the country. So if people look up familyfeudlive.com, they will find out where I'm going to be and where we're going to be doing the show. We're going up and down the East Coast and the Midwest.
Are you going to be the Richard Dawson?
No, I'm going to be the Steve Harvey.
Nice. So you're not going to be feeling up the ladies? You're just announcing the wrong names?
I don't know if you've heard about Me Too.
Oh.
But there's a thing now.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll get riding on out of town. I thought Me Too was when somebody says, I have a podcast, and then everybody else goes, Me Too.
Yeah, Steve, go ahead and ask your wife about Me Too. Maybe she'll explain it to you and get you on board.
All right. Alonzo Bodden, thank you so much for taking the time out and letting us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street. It was a super pleasure and a huge honor to talk to you. And again, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Thanks for having me on, man. Have a good one.
You too. Take it easy.
Bye.
Hey guys, this is Steve Owens from Fascination Street Podcast here with a very important message. I'm awesome. I bet you thought I was going to say something else, but nope. What's important here is that I am awesome. I started this show because I truly believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear those stories. In the short time I've been doing this show, I've interviewed actors, directors, writers, inventors, podcasters, musicians, pro athletes, Olympic athletes, actual war heroes, even a Bond girl and a luthier, whatever the hell that is, and of course, regular people. From people who wanted to be stars but never gave it a real try, to big company CEOs and people who got to meet their favorite president. I love getting to meet and speak with people who have a story to tell. I feel like everyone does, and it's my job to get them to tell it. You never know who my next guest will be. An Academy Award-winning actor, a platinum-selling musician, or your own mother-in-law. But one thing is for certain, you will be fascinated by their story. So come take a walk with me down Fascination Street. You can find Fascination Street Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, FascinationStreetPod.com. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.